On the surface of it, this morning's gospel about Bartimaeus being cured of his blindness seems quite straightforward. Jesus cures a blind man who was blind and now can see. This miraculous intervention into his physical condition has left me wondering all week. Why doesn't Jesus do the same for us as regularly as it seems to happen in the Gospels? So many of us have prayed for healing or for a cure. So many of us have prayed for miraculous intervention. And yet, at least in my experience, those miraculous interventions seem few and far between. So why Bartimaeus? Why this story that seems, again, on the surface, so straightforward? Well, to understand this, we need to look at the entire Gospel of Mark briefly, and notice that it's actually divided into two halves. The first half of Mark talks about Jesus preaching and teaching. He speaks in parables. He heals people and casts out demons. The second half of Mark is when he goes into Jerusalem. He starts to question the religious authorities. He gets himself into some hot water. He eventually is arrested and ends up on the cross. These two halves of Mark actually meet in the middle at this story of Bartimaeus. It is Bartimaeus that serves as the linchpin, the hinge, between the first part of Mark and the second part of Mark. And I would argue that it's actually Bartimaeus who gets it right when so many others whom Jesus has encountered get it wrong. The story of Bartimaeus and his miraculous healing lies not just in Jesus saying the magic words and bringing back his eyesight. It lies in the cloak. Now, I'll forgive you if you don't remember a cloak being mentioned in the gospel. It was in there. Before he was healed, there was a cloak. Now, Bartimaeus is a blind beggar. He's lying on the side of the road when Jesus and the caravan go by him. His disciples and a crowd have started following. Bartimaeus, noticing who it is, starts to cry out, "Have mercy on me, have mercy on me." But the crowd, and maybe even some of the disciples, try to silence him. "Be quiet, beggar. You're a no one. Just stay put." But he continues, he persists, yelling after Jesus, until finally Jesus hears him. When Jesus hears Bartimaeus, he says to his disciples, "Bring that man here, have him come to me." And the disciples communicate the message to Bartimaeus. He wants to see you. He's calling you. Bartimaeus, Mark says, stands up, throws off his cloak, and runs over to Jesus. It's at this moment, standing in front of Jesus, that Jesus asks Bartimaeus a question that he's asked previously, even just last week. "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus, or Jesus says to Bartimaeus. And Bartimaeus' reply is, "I want to see again." "Go. Your faith has made you well," is the response. Now, this cloak issue, this throwing off of the cloak, again, an innocuous detail that holds so much significance. Because back then, a beggar's cloak was all that he had. It was his whole kind of everything. It was his protection from the wind and the rain and the cold. Just a cloak, a big tablecloth like one of these numbers that probably is a little dirtier. It was his income. Beggars could take their cloaks and kind of spread them out onto the street, and passersby would put change or money in, sort of like a musician's open guitar box where you throw money in on the subway. And the cloak becomes an identity for Bartimaeus. Even though most people would be able to recognize him as a beggar, the cloak signifies to everyone who he is and where in society he belongs. So his cloak is his protection, his income, his identity. It's everything. And yet when Jesus calls Bartimaeus, he takes the cloak and he just chucks it. He just chucks it like it was nothing. He's ready for that whole thing to be gone. And then he's ready to receive his miracle. That's when he's ready to go and stand before Jesus and answer the question, "What do you want me to do for you?" People have a hard time parting with their cloaks. We have a hard time parting with our cloaks, and we have a lot of cloaks to choose from. many of which were covered in earlier parts of Mark. Even just recently, as a couple of weeks ago, we heard about the rich young ruler who asked Jesus how to get into heaven, and Jesus says to go and sell all of his possessions and follow him. But the rich young ruler goes away grieving because, the text says, he had many possessions. Our money, our possessions can be a cloak, a security blanket that insulate us from the world. It provides stability and assurance that everything's going to be okay. As long as I have my stuff, as long as I have my nest egg, as long as I have my income, I'll be okay, we tell ourselves. And yet, Jesus invites us to shed the cloak of money and possessions. Status, as last week's gospel tells us, when James and John, sons of Zebedee, are arguing about who's going to be greatest in the kingdom, Jesus looks at them and rebukes them, telling them that it's not your status that's going to get you into heaven. That's not part of the game here. But our status helps us know who we are in society. It helps us to understand our place in this world. Our status is often how we know kind of our purpose, where we're going, and why we're doing it. But Jesus invites us this morning to shed the cloak of status too. Even for those of us faithful who are sitting in church week after week, those of us who are, as we like to say, religious and spiritual, we tend to think that our religion is going to be a kind of insurance policy, just in case. Just in case everything goes really haywire, or at the end of our life, that insurance policy that's going to guarantee our acceptance into heaven. We cling to that cloak of our religiosity, especially when we need it the most. And yet Jesus this morning reminds us that it is through following him, not through investing in a religious insurance policy. Shed the cloak there too. And finally, as we barrel down through this week and into the next, I think a lot of us tend to look into our political lives, and we look at that as a cloak that will keep us safe and secure. We look at politics as a way that will make sure the world is a better place for years and decades to come. If we can just get the right people into the right positions, everything will be okay, we tell ourselves over and over and over again. The cloak of politics, Jesus questions too. Our cloaks are so dear to us, so precious to us, and yet when we come to our moment in need of a miracle, when we need that healing or that intervention, when we need that conflict resolved with our family or our friends, we need that job situation abated that just won't seem to go away, we ask God to just divinely intervene and take care of it for us, even as we're shrouded in layers of cloaks. As we think about Bartimaeus this morning, it wasn't just the recovery of sight for him. As we trace back that miracle, we see that he had to let go of so much to be ready for the miracle. And once the miracle happened, once his sight was brought back, it wasn't just that he could see and he could go off and do his own thing. He was a changed man. He had a new identity. He had a new purpose. He had a new outlook, literally, on the world. And the outlook that he chose to follow was Jesus. It's a whole new way. Miracles don't just stand isolated from the rest of our lives before and after. Miracles come after letting go of cloaks, and they lead us into new life, the possibilities of which we can barely even begin to fathom. So we're quick to jump to wanting a miracle when it's convenient for us, and yet I think we oftentimes forget about the radical cost of those miracles in letting go, in questioning, in being healed, in changing our identity, and walking in a new life. I've been thinking about these miracles. I'm a miracle guy. We're a miracle church. We believe in miracles. We believe in them as costly as they are, and I see in so many of your lives miracles that have happened. Times that hope seems to be lost and something turned around. Diagnoses that were headed for doom that were reversed by the doctors, inexplicable cures that have happened even as recently as a couple of weeks ago that medical professionals can't explain. People who had conflict so deep in their family systems suddenly kind of softening and evaporating for no reason whatsoever. Miracles happen time and time and time again for the people of God. And yet, as you think of your own miracles, big or small, known or only known to you, trace them back. Because miracles don't come after mountaintops. They come at the end of valleys. The suffering, the difficulty that gets us to the point where we have to let go. There's no other option but to let go. The doctors have run out of options. We are at our wits' end. That family member doesn't seem to change. Our job doesn't seem to improve. We let go, just like Bartimaeus, of that cloak of money and possessions, that cloak of status, that cloak of religious insurance, that cloak of our politics. We let go, and suddenly the miracle of Jesus happens to you and to me. Be miracle people. Not because we're going to kind of work the system, but because we love this Lord of ours in Jesus Christ who calls us by name. And with exuberance, let us shed our cloaks. Let us throw off those things that hold us and insulate us from the love of God. Let us receive our miracle and then follow Christ. Follow Christ, a changed people living a new life. Amen.